about my worst trip off LSD. So one of the kids in my friend group was about to leave for Arizona, and we would always talk about how we need to trip together before he leaves. And anytime that I would trip off acid, I would go to my one plug. Well, he ran out, so we had to go to somebody else. And I've never tried this kid's stuff before. I just said, fuck it, YOLO. Which should not have been my motto at the time, but it was. So that night, we're in the car, and one of our friends is driving because he's sober, obviously. And before I put the tab on my tongue, I started to get really nervous. And I have never felt like that before I've taken acid. But I kind of just said, fuck it, and I put it on my tongue. So we go pick up 2 more people that I'm not really close with. So then we make our way over to our other friend's apartment. And I'm kind of feeling it, but not really. But then as soon as we walk into that apartment, I start tripping balls. And you know, everything was going good, but then my dumb ass decided to look in the fucking mirror. And as soon as I look in the mirror, I see myself smile back at me, like for part 2. Okay, part 2. So like I said, I look in the mirror and I see myself smiling back at me. And that's whenever everything went south so quick. I sat on the bed, tried to pull myself together because I didn't want to make a fucking scene in front of everybody. But then I got caught in this fucking loop. And if you don't know what the loop is, then I'm going to tell you what it is. It's basically where you feel like you're doing the same thing over and over and over again. And then I started looking around at everybody and it looked like their faces were melting. One of my friends got up off his chair, walked to the other side of the room, and I watched him do that. But when I look back over at the fucking chair, he was still sitting there. So I looked at my one friend that was sober, who I was actually really close with, and I think he saw the look in my eye and he was like, do you want to leave now? And I just shook my head, yeah, like I could not deal with that shit anymore. So we go to his car and then we drive to my boyfriend's house. Because I could not go home, I would have got crucified. Well, we get in the house and as soon as his mom sees me, she knows that something's wrong, like for part 3. Okay, part 3. So like I said, I walked in and she knew that something was wrong with me right away. Because she was like, oh, I have a letter from your boyfriend. And usually I would run up, grab it, read it really quickly, because I would only get like 1 letter a week. But instead I ran downstairs because her face was fucking melting. So 5 minutes later, she has to come downstairs and help me get dressed into my pajamas because I forgot how to dress myself. I didn't want to be left alone that night, so my friend stayed in the basement with me. So he went and tried to go to sleep, but he couldn't because I was watching Butterfly Effect for 8 hours straight. Like that was the only thing that could calm me down. But I still don't even know all the freaking words to it, which is weird. Like he would try to change the video and somehow I end up back to Butterfly Effect. And then he tried to kiss me. So he left the next morning because he had to go to work, which was at like 11 a.m. And I took this tab at 8 p.m. the day before. So I was getting texts like, where are you? You're supposed to be home now. So I had to go home and act normal in front of everybody while I'm still tripping balls. And I also got grounded for coming home late because I could not come home at the right time because I was tripping so hard. And this lasted for about 24 hours. Storytime about how I found out that my boyfriend was trying to get with another girl on Valentine's Day. Okay, there's a lot that goes into this story time, so let me break it down for you real quick. I was a sophomore and my boyfriend and I had been dating for about 4 months now. And he was a junior. Well, there was this girl that he was for some reason obsessed with in his Spanish class. She was a freshman. And I know you're probably thinking, oh, well, how did you know he was obsessed with her? Well, he would Snapchat this girl 24/7. Even his friends told me he was obsessed with her. So I talked to him and I told him I was uncomfortable with how much he was talking to this girl. And he said, oh, okay, I'm sorry, I'll block her. Now, I didn't ask him to do that, but it made me feel more confident in how he felt about me. Well, Valentine's Day comes around, and we didn't talk all day until he came to pick me up. I wished him a happy Valentine's Day and got left undelivered. So we get to the restaurants, and we decide to put our phones at the end of the table so that way we would be more focused on each other. Well, he goes to the bathroom, and then I see this name pop up on his phone, like for part 2. Part 2. So, like I said, I saw this name on his phone, and there was something special about this name. So, whenever I kept streaks, I would put the word streak, and then an emoji, and then the person's name. And he got the idea that instead of keeping her name, he would put it as streak. So I was like, that's really fucking weird. And at first I was like, what the fuck? So I opened his phone, and what do you know? It's from that girl. And she was replying back to a big paragraph that he sent her. And we had school that same day. So at 6:30 in the morning, this girl got a big paragraph from my boyfriend about how she's such a beautiful, amazing girl and that she deserves somebody who's going to take her out and buy her flowers and stuff. And how if she wanted to go out to dinner, let him know. He took an extremely long time in the bathroom, so the waiter came to our table. So I ordered $300 worth of food for myself. So when he came back, I told him that I had to go call my mom and I left. And he was stuck with a $400 bill. Storytime about how I broke up my best friend and his girlfriend. So it was our sophomore year in high school, and my best friend and I had known each other since we were like 8 years old. And I've always had a crush on him. Like anytime he would get a girlfriend, I would try and break them up. And it would work. Well, our freshman year of high school, he started dating this one girl. Well, when he started dating her, he distanced himself from me because she didn't like how much time we were spending together. So a few months go by and my birthday's coming up. And mind you, within these past few months, we only seen each other like twice. And he had me blocked on all social media. Well, our parents were really good friends because we lived in the same cul-de-sac. So my mom invited him and his parents to my birthday party. So at the end of my party, my friends left and him and his parents stayed. And my parents really didn't care if I drank alcohol, so we had like a whole bottle of vodka to ourselves. So we're in the basement and we're taking shots together. Well, I got him super drunk and he fell asleep. And while he was sleeping, I went on his phone and like for part two. And I was able to get into his phone because he stole my fingerprint from when we were best friends. So I unblocked myself on all social medias, and there was an ottoman pushed against the couch, so while he was sleeping, I was able to go lay next to him. So while I was laying next to him, I took a few pictures of us, and I saved them in his camera roll, and I also sent one to his girlfriend, and it was about 1 a.m. Well, she opened it right away, and then she started going off and would not stop calling his phone. So after that, I turned his phone off. So he started to wake up, and then we started drinking more. And then we started fooling around. And while we were doing the nasty, I took a video. But he didn't see it because the phone was in front of me. And I had his girlfriend on Snapchat. So what did I do? I sent the motherfucking video to her. So the next day, obviously, he found out what happened. So then he came over to my house to talk to me. And I told him how I was upset that she was keeping him from me. So he broke up with her and started dating me. Story time about how I woke up to my best friend having a seizure. A little background information. So my close friend invited me over to his house to spend the night. And we're gonna call him Jay. Well, Jay and I got to his house, and his parents are really strict, so he had to sneak me in. So he told me to wait by the garage. And as soon as he opens the front door to his house, I hear his parents screaming. So he's inside fighting with his parents. I'm outside freezing my ass off. So an hour later, he comes out to get me, walks me through the garage, and I have to hide in this crawl space. So while I'm hiding in this crawl space, him and his parents are still arguing. And his parents walk past where I was like 5 times. So his mom gets in the car and leaves. She said she was going to kill herself. His dad comes into the garage, starts crying. I literally witnessed him have a mental fucking breakdown. Then his mom came back, said that she hated everybody. So then Jay purposely bangs his head off of the kitchen table 2 times. So when he came into the garage to get me, he had an ice pack on his head. Then we snuck up to his room like for part 2. Part 2. So like I said, he rushes me up to his room because his dad was in the basement and his mom left again, threatening to kill herself again. And while we're upstairs, he starts taking dabs. And we're up for a little bit and then we go to sleep. So at like 8 a.m, we both wake up. He's on his phone, I'm on my phone, we're not facing each other. And then all of a sudden, I feel the bed start to shake, like a lot. So I turn over and this kid is having a full-blown fucking seizure. Like he's foaming at the mouth, his eyes are literally rolling in the back of his fucking head. So I get up and roll him over onto his side because I didn't want him to start choking. And I'm fucking freaking out and don't know what to do because I wasn't even supposed to be there in the first place. And he's like making all these types of noises, so I go and I run down the hallway, I try to find his parents' room, and I open the door and have to wake them up dead out of their sleep. And I was like, your son's having a seizure. So his mom runs over to the room, and his dad's like, well, who the fuck are you? And why the fuck are you in my house? And I was like, your son told me that I could stay the night last night. Oh, like for part 3. Part 3. So like I said, his dad's like interrogating me right now. So they call an ambulance, his son leaves in the ambulance, they didn't go with him, and his dad's like, you're never allowed in this fucking house again. And then he asked me, did he take anything last night? And I'm like, he did dabs, but like, I didn't do anything because I don't do that stuff. So he goes over to where all of his dab stuff is and starts throwing the glass pieces in the garbage, making sure that he fucking breaks them all. And his mom comes over to me to comfort me because I'm literally like fucking crying because this kid almost died right next to me. And she's like, it's okay, sweetie, like this happens to him a lot. But I felt so uncomfortable because he was like making it seem like it was my fault. So I hurry up and call my mom, and my mom doesn't get there till like 30 minutes because their house is a little bit further away. And for all of you wondering what happened to him, I don't know because this happened this morning. Story time about how my boyfriend was cheating on me with my stepsister. So a little background information, my mom remarried whenever I was in 8th grade, and my stepdad had 2 daughters, one which was my age and we got along really well. Well, before my sisters and I went back to school, my mom wanted to go on a camping trip with everyone, and my boyfriend was coming because he was really close with my family. So while my stepsister and I are packing up, she starts acting really weird, and we're gonna call my boyfriend Kevin. She was like, oh, is Kevin still coming with us? And I was like, yeah. And then she goes, oh, are you and Kevin still together? And I'm like, we were never broken up. Like, the fuck? Like I said, she was just being super fucking weird. But anyways, we all get in the car, we drive up there, and her and Kevin start being super weird around each other. Like, they were being too touchy. Anytime that I wanted to go do something with Kevin, she would say, oh, Kevin, you can come do this instead. Well, that night, Kevin and I are sleeping in our tent. At least I thought he was. And I wake up to some loud noises in the other tent, like for part 2. Part 2. So like I said, I heard a bunch of noises and talking in my stepsister's tent. And I wake up and my boyfriend isn't in the tent. So I be very quiet getting out of my tent, and I go over to hers and I just listen. And oh bitch, I should have just confronted them because I got my motherfucking feelings hurt. He was telling her how he didn't love me at all and how he only wanted to be with her. And how every time that they kissed each other and screwed each other, he felt such a connection between them. So not only was he cheating physically, but they had a connection. Wonderful. So I open her tent and I confront them. This was the most degrading thing I've ever went through in my life. And I said, I heard you guys outside. And I'm just not the type of girl who's going to come at another girl because my man wants her. Because at that point, he's not my man. She goes, sit down, sweetie, we need to talk. Apparently they're in love. So they started dating. They're still dating. And my parents allowed it. So I distanced myself from all of them. Story time about the guy who pretended to be gay in high school to get closer to all the girls. So it was the first day of my freshman year. And at lunch, this guy came and sat with me and my friends. And we were super confused because he was like one of the popular boys. And we were like, oh, why aren't you sitting with your friends? And he's like, oh, because ever since I came out as gay, they don't want to be friends with me anymore, and they're being super mean to me. So we felt really bad, and we started getting to know him, and he was actually a really cool person. So we started inviting him to our sleepovers and everything like that. And because he was gay, we felt really comfortable getting dressed around him, talking about things that we wouldn't talk about in front of anybody. We're done. And we're all like, oh, well, why don't you just say that you did the nasty with all of us? And he was like, well, I don't think they'll believe it, even if you guys said, yeah, you did do it. So we were like, okay, then let's do it for real. So that night, we did the nasty, all 5 of us. So that morning, we all wake up and he's literally gone. Like, he didn't wake us up to say goodbye, which wasn't normal. So the weekend goes past. Monday, we go to school. And in the morning, my friends and I have time to walk around and everybody's just staring at us, like for part 3. Part 3 about the guy who pretended to be gay to get closer to all the girls. So like I said, we got to school and everybody's just looking at us. And all of a sudden, we get tagged in this Instagram account. And there's a video of all 5 of us doing the nasty in my bedroom. There's pictures of me and my friends getting undressed. And there's a screenshot of the FaceTime where we all showed our boobs. And under the post, he was exposing a bunch of shit about us. And my one best friend was literally crying so hard because everybody now knew that she was born with like both parts. And also after gym class, we would just tell him to come in the locker room. And the teacher didn't care because he was gay. So there were also a bunch of pictures of other girls on there too. I'm not even going to talk about the legal trouble, but my parents made me move schools because they cared about my image and they didn't want me hanging out with any of those friends anymore. He got expelled. The teacher got fired for that bullshit. So that just ruined having a gay best friend for me. Oh, also my parents saw me have a threesome in my bedroom.
This girl literally lived a nightmare. A 17-year-old girl was watching TV late at night when her motion detector lights in her driveway suddenly went on. She assumed it was just an animal, so she got up, drew the blinds, and went back to watching TV. Then a little bit later, it happened again. Before she could even react, she looks over and clearly makes out a silhouette of a person right behind the blinds who starts banging aggressively on the window. The girl stands up and goes, "I'm gonna call the cops!" And the figure stops for just a second, sprints to the side door and starts pounding even louder on that, screaming incoherently. The girl runs to the bathroom, barricades herself inside while she waits for the police, and then her worst nightmares come true. She hears glass shatter in the other room. After a few minutes of silence, she opens her door just a crack to get a peek outside, and standing in her living room next to a broken window is some crazy old woman who looks over at her and starts sprinting toward her. The lady comes smashing into the door and starts wailing on it until the police arrive and take her away. She was a lunatic who had escaped her facility.
Just found out I leaked my own nudes. Story time. So about a month ago, my manager came over and she took me to the side and she was like, "I don't want to alarm you, but I've dealt with it. There was a man threatening to leak indecent images of you if you don't send him more." Huh? She said, "Yeah. He has pictures of your jubblies." Excuse me, I have the chest of a 12-year-old boy. There is nothing to capture. It's just bone. I don't take pictures of that. Ever. Like, I'd understand if I had double D's, but baby, I've got minus A's. So I said, "Thank you for dealing with a cheeky bit of blackmail in my business email, but he's lying. Let's move forward." So I forgot about it. And then today, I'm uploading a YouTube video, and I haven't checked my channel in ages. What do I see when I check it? Ads limited due to nudity. On one of my vlogs. Which vlog is it, you might ask?
I'll vlog getting my nips pierced.
I need to take a class on how to blur correctly. My itty bitty titty committee is on the internet. If you're about to check, please subscribe. And also, I'm sorry in advance. If yours are small, it might make you feel better.
My brother used to be obsessed with Call of Duty, COD 4. When he was like 12 years old, he had the headset and everything. And I don't know if you guys have ever heard someone play COD 4, but it kind of sounds like this. Get him. Get that mother. Go now. Yeah. You missed the fucking guy. God. So it's a super wholesome game, but to annoy my brother, I used to sit next to him and watch him while he played. And one day he was playing with someone who had the username Little Pickle. And at the time I was 10 years old and I really liked that username. I thought it was cute. So I changed all my usernames, AOL, email, Club Penguin, to Little Pickle. And then somehow my dad found out that I did that. And he thought Little Pickle was a really cute name too, so he started calling me that. And my brother for some reason didn't realize or didn't know. But my dad kept calling me Little Pickle for years, and then it caught on, so my friends started calling me Little Pickle. When I graduated college, my parents made a sign that said, "Congratulations, Little Pickle." Then one day last year, my brother was like, "It's weird that people call you Little Pickle." And I was like, "Why is it weird?" He was like, "I remember there used to be this super creepy kid on COD 4 who only ever talked about his penis, and he called it his little pickle. All he talked about was his dick." So now I'm 25 and people still call me Little Pickle. Meanwhile, there's some sketchy video gamer out there also calling his penis a little pickle, so.
One day, I went to my friend's birthday party. We're gonna call her Jazzy. Well, I'm at the party, and then Jazzy's dad pulls me aside, and he's like, "Can we talk in private?" I was like, "Yeah, of course," because I thought it was gonna be like a gift for Jazzy. So long story short, he pulls me aside, and it gets so motherfucking weird. Like homeboy starts holding my hand, and he's like, "I always thought you were one of Jazzy's most beautiful friends. Age is just a number. I don't really like my wife." And I was like, that's disgusting. So I got to the point where I got really uncomfortable. I ran away and I went to go tell Jazzy's mom what her husband was telling me. So I go tell her, right? This is the best part. So I go to tell Jazzy's mom and she's like, "Thank you for telling me. I'm gonna take care of it. Here's this water, drink it. Like, you're probably so overwhelmed right now." So I remember I drank the water and I felt dizzy and tingly. Next thing I know, I'm in the hospital because Jazzy's mom put poison in my... After I told Jazzy's mom that her husband was trying to get at me, she gives me a cup of water and she's like, "Drink it. You're probably so stressed out." Long story short, she put poison in the water. I wake up in the hospital with my parents around me, investigators, all of that ish. They're asking me a lot of questions about Jazzy, about the party, what was going on, like, what was her dad telling you? Long story short, this whole investigation is going on Jazzy's family and their background, all of that stuff. This is the best part! So the investigators, you know, they find out that Jazzy's mom has a background on hurting and poisoning a lot of girls that her husband looks at and talks to. I don't really talk to Jazzy anymore. I don't really know what happened. All I do know is that they took Jazzy's mom to like a psych ward. Storytime Tinder edition. Okay, the story blew up on Twitter like a while ago, but I'm just gonna retell it because it's very informational. So there's this guy and this girl, and they met through Tinder, and then they met up and they went on this date. And they were out at dinner, and then she starts not feeling so well. And then she says, "I really need to go home." And he says, "Yeah, I'll drive you home." And she says, "Okay." So then they get to her house, and then she starts feeling better. So then she says, "Do you want to come in for some coffee?" And then he says, "Yeah, sure." So they go inside, they have their coffee, and then she doesn't feel well again. And she's like, "Oh, I'm sorry, I don't feel well again. I think you really need to leave." And he's like, "Okay." And he leaves. And then she goes to bed, and in the middle of the night, she wakes up, and she hears this noise down in her kitchen. And so she locks her door and she calls the cop. And the 911 operator is just on the other line saying, "Can you just stay on the line until the cops get there?" And then the cops get there and they're like, "The door is locked. Like, we don't think anyone's inside." And she's like, "I promise you, someone's inside my house. I can hear them." She says, "You have my permission to break down the door." So she's still up in her room, and then she hears the cops break down the door. And then she hears some wrestling and some fighting. Part 2 coming now. Part 2 of the Tinder story. So then after the cops break down the door, they go upstairs and they knock on her door and they're like, "It's okay, we've got the guy, everything's fine." And they say to her, "We don't really want you to stay here tonight. We don't think that you should see what he's done." And when I say he, it's the guy that she went on a date with. And she's like, "No, I need to see what he's done." So she goes downstairs and she sees her kitchen wrapped all in plastic, and there's a saw and a hammer and a knife. And earlier when he came into her house for coffee, he set his keys down right next to her keys. And so when he left, he picked up both sets of keys. And that is how he got back into her house. And they tested her, like her blood and everything, and she wasn't supposed to wake up because of how many drugs were in her system, because on the date, he drugged her. And then I guess he was just planning on chopping up her body in her own kitchen. I don't know. Stay safe.
Okay, story time. So I work at a jewelry store, and today a man came in looking for a gift for his wife for their 10th year anniversary. He ended up picking out a piece that said, "My beautiful wife." And I said, "Anything else for you today?" And he said, "No, that's it for her, but I do want to make another purchase using a separate credit card. And could you possibly create a different account for me?" And I said, "Sure, what are you looking for?" And he said, "Do you have anything that says girlfriend?" And I said, yes. And he said, perfect, I'll take it. And do you have anything that says happy 1-year anniversary to go with it? And I said, yes. And he said, perfect, I'll take it. So I boxed everything up all nice and I put them in their respected bags. He had me mark a K for Kristen on the bottom of his wife's bag and an L for Laura on the bottom of his girlfriend's bag. I put pretty bows on them. I handed it to him. I said, they're gonna love it. Have a nice day. And he said, thank you. And shit, I just remembered that his wife's name is Laura and his girlfriend's name is Kristen. I must have mixed up the bags. Oops.
So it's Friday night, it's Roxy's birthday weekend, and we're all going to her house for the first time ever for our group sleepover. So we get there, and honestly, everything seemed really normal at first. Roxy's house was really nice, and honestly, I was confused why she never wanted us there before. So then we start making banana bread, and all of a sudden, Laura jumps and screams and runs to the other side of the kitchen. She's like, did you guys feel that? And we're all like, what are you talking about, Laura? She's like, I swear something just touched my lower back. And Laura's face turned really pale, like she was genuinely scared. And we spend the next hour convincing her that no one was there, no one touched her back. So then we start watching a movie, Disturbia. Shout out to Shia LaBeouf. And Nina goes to the bathroom. And when she comes back, she's like, Roxy, it looks like something upstairs is maybe leaking because there's this massive wet stain on your bathroom wall. And Roxy's like, oh, don't worry, that stain's always there. She's like, we actually can't figure out where it's coming from. We've had plumbers come and they can't figure it out either. There's no drain or pipe or anything that could be causing a leak at that part of the house anyway. And then Roxy says, but that's why we think our house is haunted. We all look at her kind of shocked and she's like, yeah, that's why I never invited you guys to sleep over because it can get kind of creepy. But honestly, at that point, I wasn't that creeped out until we went to bed because that's when stuff started getting weird.
This is why you should never stay awake past 3 a.m. A woman in her early 20s was away from home on a business trip. The night before she was supposed to board her plane, she had trouble sleeping and had this intense fear that someone was staring at her in her room. She was up until 3, tossing and turning until she started to hear whispers. It was a deep voice repeating the words, I'm coming to get you, I'm coming to get you. But she ignored it and eventually fell asleep. After her plane landed, she was exhausted but drove home anyway. About 30 minutes into her drive, she started hearing the same whispers from the previous night, but she thought it was because she was sleep deprived, so she kept driving. She was almost home when she began to feel sick. Her eyes were watering, her nose was running, and she let out a large sneeze. Bless you, said the same deep, eerie voice. She quickly pulled into her driveway, hugged her husband, and sat down to tell him what was going on. When this happened,
I can still hear that voice.
So when I turned 13, I had a birthday party. It's no big deal. I mean, I was just blossoming, turning into a woman. And so I remember my mom was like, no one's allowed in the rooms. Everyone needs to be outside. If you see anyone inside, you need to tell me. I was like, oh my God, Booma, you don't need to pop off. I get it, Booma, come on. I remember I saw 3 adults walk out of my room. I didn't tell my mom, but let me tell you why. Because I was like, maybe they're designing a gift for me. So the end of the day came, no surprise present came. I'm not mad at you, mad because I'm happy. So we started cleaning up and then we went to go clean my room in case. Oh, the best part is coming! There was a voodoo doll under my bed. It looked exactly like me. I remember there was one needle on its left eye, another needle on its heart, and it was laying on like a ratchet green leaf. And then next to it, there was a note that said, this is all gonna be mine in cursive. So then my mom started doing research on this. After we found the voodoo doll, my mom did some research and we found out that someone was basically trying to do evil to me and harm me. Like, I appreciate you counting me in. I personally, I don't want to be voodooed, but thank you. Thankfully though, we had some cameras in the house, so we were about to see who was behind this. This is the best part. We checked the cameras. And the 3 people that I saw walk out of my room, they were strangers. My parents didn't invite them. They didn't know them. So what my dad did was he screenshotted the footage and then he posted it on Facebook and he was like, does anyone know who this is? So we ended up finding them, contacting them, whatever. And we found out they work for this company that does witch stuff. And someone was paying them to do all of this witchery stuff on me. No, I'm fine. What about you? So we asked them, what is behind all of this? What magic are you trying to do? Who paid you?
After my dad contacted the witches basically told him that it's better to not talk about this on the phone. They then told my dad that the only person they can release information to is me. Long story short, I had to meet the witches at an alley by myself. By myself. I pull up, I feel like a whole ass horse. I'm about to shit everywhere. So then I come across the witches and I remember they were looking straight at the ground. And I remember I was like, hi. And they were like, we cannot look you in the eyes because then the curse is gonna be ours. I remember I started asking them questions like, just the usual. Like, why'd you make a voodoo doll of me? They told me that the whole point behind this was for me to eventually turn crazy and be lonely forever. Bitch, I'm already crazy and needy as f. Unfortunately, they said they couldn't tell me who was behind all of this. I remember they told me how to break the curse though. They told me to put the voodoo doll in a wooden box and set it on fire. And they gave me this like nasty hot green juice, but apparently it killed the curse.
Well, one day this random guy added me on Snapchat. I added him just because you really never know. It could be my soulmate or something. Like, you know, we're gonna call him motherfucking Larry. So right when I added Larry, he sent me a snap. Oh, this is the best part. Just wait, sweetie. So it was a photo of a wall with pictures of me, baby pictures of me, even a picture of my cat with like tiny post-its all around it. And in the caption, he was like, I manifested you, you cannot leave anymore. I was kind of scared, so I blocked him. And I remember I left to my grandma's house because I was just really scared to even be in my own house. And so the next morning of me staying at my grandma's house, we got mailed this like big box with like confetti in it. And there was this envelope, and I remember the envelope was like, hey, it's Larry. I told you you cannot leave. And my family's number was there, our address was there, and a bottle of pepper spray. Well, after Larry sends me a box with not only a letter saying that I cannot leave him, the letter also has my family's numbers, my address. Well, after receiving this lovely package, I mean, what else could you ask for? I decided to ask my grandma's neighbors, like, did you see anyone drop off this box? Anything. I'll take anything at this point. They all said no, so I was like, okay, you know what, whatever, I'm just gonna sleep on it tonight. Maybe this Larry person just tweaked out a little bit. You know what happens to all of us, whatever. Oh, I was so wrong. Okay, so guess what happened the next morning? We get a letter from Larry. So this time the letter's like, you cannot escape me. I will follow you everywhere. And so I was like, bet. So I know this guy who's really good at hacking people. I told him about my situation and he agreed to help me. Long story short, I unblocked Larry, sent him a snap with his full name, his number, everything. And I was like, still wanna follow me?
I was ringing up a dad and son, and the first thing I noticed about them is they were both wearing t-shirts with fish on them, so I knew they were probably used to catching shit, and I was definitely not about to let them catch an attitude. So the dad stopped me as I was ringing things up, and he said, whoa, 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 that's supposed to be on sale. And I was like, oh, okay, just let me rescan it. And so I rescanned it, and the price was just like my weight. It just wasn't getting any lower. So I looked at him and I was like, this price is stagnant. And he was like, okay, we'll get someone else over here. So my coworker came over and she scanned the item and manually entered the item number, and the price just wasn't moving. And then the dad decided to elbow the son and go, haha, how many women does it take to scan an item? And then he elbowed him again and decided to repeat the joke. And I was just sitting there like, dang, you about to bruise his ribs. So then the dad took us to where he saw the sale sign, and lo and behold, there was a sale sign, but it was for a completely different product. So I looked at him and I said, see, this sign is actually for a different product, as you can see printed on here. And then I elbowed my coworker and said, haha, how many men does it take to read a sign?
Story time. There was this one time in the 6th grade during gym class I was telling my friend some stupid story about elementary school. After I finished talking, I realized she wasn't even fucking listening, so I turned around and looked at her and called her a bitch. Then this ugly-ass popular girl turns around and screams, did you just call me a bitch? I turned to face her and I was like, I wasn't even talking to you, I'm talking to my friend. Then she gets in my face and says, stop lying, I know you called me that because you're jealous of me. After she put her nasty-ass smelly mouth in my face, she ran off to tell her little squad everything. After class finished, one of the girls came up to me and said, if you're gonna talk about my friend like that, we're gonna have a problem. So I screamed back in this bitch's face and said, I already told your friend that I wasn't even talking to her and I wasn't even facing her directions.
Story time. My boyfriend found out that I had an OnlyFans. So my boyfriend and I have been together for probably 2 years. And I had just turned 18 and we decided that we were going to move in together. We both worked full-time jobs. I was a waitress, he worked at Walmart. And the restaurant that I worked at was literally a 2-minute walk from Walmart. And I was forced to get a job there by my boyfriend, because he had super bad trust issues. I know you guys are gonna be like, oh, well, I can see why. No. It was because of this rumor that went around right before we graduated that me and his best friend made out at a party. Ciao, anyways, back to the story. So then COVID hit. And it got to the point where him and I couldn't pay our bills or anything like that. So he got a job working for his uncle. And I went on unemployment, but it still wasn't helping. But my best friend was a stripper. And she told me that she had an OnlyFans account and that she was making really good money off of it. So since I was home every day doing absolutely nothing, I decided that I would make an OnlyFans account. And I didn't tell my boyfriend about it, like for part 2. Part 2 about how my boyfriend found out that I had an OnlyFans. So like I said, I made the OnlyFans and I didn't tell him about it. And I was only putting stuff on there like twice a week. But then my friend promoted me and I started making a lot more money. But then I started putting stuff on there every time that my boyfriend would go to work. So a month goes by and my boyfriend realizes that I have way more money than I did before. And he keeps asking me about it, but I tell him don't worry about it, which definitely seemed really sus. Anyways, the one day while he's at work, I'm taking some pics for my OF, and I'm blasting my music, And I turn around and lo and behold, who do you think was standing in the doorway? My boyfriend. And he has his phone out and he's recording me. So then he started explaining to me that because since I gave him such bad trust issues and I wouldn't tell him where I was getting the extra money, he set up cameras in the house. And he's been watching me for 2 weeks straight. He's still recording on his phone at this time. So we broke up, and now there's a video of me half naked on YouTube and him exposing me.
This is why you should always lock your doors. A class was playing a game of Kahoot when they heard a voice on the intercom say, "This is not a drill, go into lockdown." The students huddled in the back of the classroom and then the power went off. Minutes later, the students heard the sound of a man screaming at the top of his lungs, running down the hallway. The lunatic man started banging on the lockers and his screams gradually got louder. He then started banging on the classroom window, yelling, "Open up." He eventually left, and 10 minutes later, a voice on the intercom said a mentally ill person had entered the school and attacked the lady at the front desk. The staff did a sweep of the school and still couldn't find him, so they locked the doors and resumed class. Later that night, one of the janitors went into the utility closet when this happened.
Don't read the comments, it will spoil the very satisfying ending. In 1999, a 20-year-old kid was obsessed with this 16-year-old girl, but she wasn't into him. Frustrated, he breaks into her house and demands that she dates him. When she refuses, he kills her. And then he kills her 14-year-old sister too. Or so he thought. The 14-year-old survived and easily identified Paul Powell as the killer. Powell showed no remorse in court and even called the victims stupid. When he was sentenced to death, though, his attitude changed and he cried and begged for mercy. And unfortunately, mercy would come in the form of a legal loophole that switched his death sentence to a life sentence. Believing he was safe from the death penalty because of double jeopardy, he wrote this ridiculous letter to the prosecuting attorney, basically admitting to every single detail of the crime, kind of bragging about what he got away with. So the attorney just takes the letter, gives it to a judge. The judge looks at it and says, "Yep, there's new evidence here," orders a new trial, and immediately this dude is resentenced to death. And a few months later, this lowlife was executed. This is why you should never step foot on the faraway dock. In 1994, an 11-year-old named Mark arrived at summer camp and made his way over to the dining hall where the director was going to talk about the next couple of weeks. The director emphasized that no one was allowed to swim out to the dock located way out in the middle of the lake, although she didn't say why. Mark and the 3 other boys in his cabin were so intrigued by this faraway dock that the next day during lunch, while everyone was eating, they hopped in the lake and started swimming out. When they finally got out to the dock, they were a little bit let down because it looked like any other dock. But they decide to make the best of it, they climb on top and they start playing the game where they all stand on one side until it floods, last one to fall off wins. As the corner sank, they started to hear a scratching sound coming from underneath the dock. Suddenly, hundreds of these big meaty spiders come crawling out through the breaks in the wood and slide down the slanted dock towards the boys, who panic and fall forward, and there's spiders swarming their hair and their face. Turns out the dock was off limits because it was overrun with dock spiders, and the boys flooded their nest.